You don't realize it at the time. Nobody does. But your 20s are the most dangerous decade of your life. Not because of the mistakes you might make, not because of the risks you might take, but because of the choices that feel harmless in the moment and cost you everything later. Your 20s are the decade where you decide, quietly, unconsciously, whether your 30s and 40s will be built on momentum or regret. And most people don't choose. They drift, they coast, they follow the crowd. They spend their 20s trying to look like they're living well, instead of building a life where they actually are. But not you. Not this time. Not in this story. This is the story of what happens when you lock in during your 20s, instead of spending them. It starts the same way it starts for everyone else. You're young, you're free, you're overwhelmed, you're excited, you're terrified. You're surrounded by people who think the goal of your 20s is to enjoy them, as if enjoyment and discipline can't coexist. You watch your friends spend money like it's a renewable resource. Trips, bars, clothes, cars, weekends that cost more than their rent. They call it living. They call it balance. They call it you only live once. But something in you feels different. Not better, not smarter, just aware. Aware that the world is not as forgiving as people pretend it is. Aware that time moves faster than anyone warns you. Aware that your future self is watching every decision you make right now. You feel the pull, the tension, the quiet voice that says, if you don't build now, you'll pay later. So you make a decision that most people your age never make. You lock in. Not dramatically, not loudly, not with some motivational speech or a New Year's resolution. You lock in quietly, privately, deliberately. You start by cutting the noise, the nights out that leave you tired and broke, the friendships built on convenience instead of growth, the habits that numb you instead of build you. You start choosing differently, not perfectly, just differently. You choose early mornings over late nights, books over distractions, skills over entertainment, discomfort over comfort, long-term over short-term. You choose the life you want over the life that looks good on social media. And at first, it feels like you're losing. Your friends are having fun. You're grinding. Your friends are posting pictures. You're studying. Your friends are upgrading their lifestyle. You're upgrading your discipline. They laugh. They tease. They say you're too serious. They say you're missing out. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not missing out. You're buying your freedom in advance. You start building skills, real skills, skills that compound, skills that make you valuable, skills that make you dangerous. You learn how to communicate, how to sell, how to think, how to build, how to manage your mind, how to manage your money, how to manage yourself. You learn that your 20s aren't about earning money. They're about earning leverage. You learn that discipline is a superpower, that consistency is a multiplier, that focus is a cheat code. You learn that the people who win in their 30s and 40s are the ones who were invisible in their 20s. You learn that the world rewards the people who build while everyone else is distracted. And slowly, quietly, things start to shift. You start making money. Not a lot at first, but more than before. More than your friends. More than you expected. You start seeing opportunities you never noticed before. You start getting invited into rooms you used to feel unqualified for. You start becoming someone people take seriously. You start feeling something you've never felt before. Momentum. Meanwhile, the people who spent their 20s spending start feeling something else. Pressure, stress, the weight of choices that felt harmless at the time. the consequences of living for the moment instead of building for the future. They start realizing that the lifestyle they flexed in their 20s is the lifestyle they're trapped in now. They start realizing that the debt they ignored is now the debt that owns them. They start realizing that the habits they built are now the habits that limit them. They start realizing that you didn't miss out. They did. Because while they were chasing weekends, you were chasing skills. While they were chasing validation, you were chasing growth. While they were chasing pleasure, you were chasing purpose. And now the gap is visible. Not because you brag, not because you show off, but because results speak louder than opinions. You're calmer, you're sharper, you're more confident, you're more capable, you're more in control. You're not rich yet, but you're inevitable. You're not successful yet, but you're undeniable. You're not at the finish line, but you're on the right track, and the track is clear. Your 20s become the decade where you build the foundation. Your 30s become the decade where you build the structure. Your 40s become the decade where you build the empire. Not because you're lucky, not because you're gifted, but because you made a decision most people never make. You traded temporary pleasure for permanent power. You traded validation for elevation. You traded distraction for discipline. You traded fitting in for standing out. You traded your 20s for the rest of your life. And the payoff is bigger than money, bigger than success, bigger than status. The payoff is freedom. The payoff is peace. The payoff is waking up in your 30s and 40s without panic, without regret, without the weight of wasted years. The payoff is knowing you built a life you don't need a vacation from, a life that compounds, a life that expands, a life that reflects the best version of you. The payoff is becoming someone your younger self would be proud of and your older self will thank you for. This is the story of locking in during your 20s, not because it's easy, not because it's glamorous, but because it's the only decade where the sacrifices are small and the rewards are massive. Most people won't do it. Most people can't. Most people don't realize what's at stake until it's too late. But you did. You saw it. You felt it. You acted on it. And now your life is unfolding in a way that feels almost unfair. Not because you're lucky, but because you were willing to do what others weren't. This is the story of your 20s. Not spent, not wasted, not forgotten. Invested. And the return on that investment? It's only just beginning.